Midweek Murders contains graphic and explicit content. Listener discretion is advised.
You know, a funny thing that happened.
You gave birth to a live turtle.
That would have been funnier, but alas.
It would have been funny because turtles are born from eggs.
Well, you don't know how I live my life. I might have been impregnated by a bird.
Then it still would have been born through an egg, dummy.
That's the joke. I got home and Bodil had kicked out poop from her litter box into the hallway. I was like, I'm both disgusted and impressed.
That is not too shabby. That's a fair distance.
Kicking better than the Watford football team.
Hey, fuck you.
Hashtag too soon.
Too soon.
The worst part of this is that I'm going to ask her for your birthday, but you would rather I forget.
The worst part of that is you don't remember when my birthday is.
I don't remember when your birthday is. I thought that you would be thrilled.
I mean, if there was one person I would expect to remember when my birthday is, it would be my best fucking friend.
You sound like my mom. I can't even remember my own birthday, okay?
No, that's not okay.
Is it the 4th?
Not even fucking close, mate.
I believe you. Oh, that's hilarious.
How long have we known each other now?
I don't know that either, man.
What, you don't celebrate our fucking friendiversary?
I don't use Facebook. Do you know how long we've been friends?
I know when your fucking birthday is, though.
When is
the
it?
9th of March.
Well, that just shut me up, didn't it?
Yeah, suck a dick, bitch. I mean, you're right. I don't want any undue attention or focus brought to it, but, you know, you could at least still fucking remember.
I don't remember.
You could at least remember the day that you're meant to forget.
I'm sorry. I know it's in September somewhere.
It's very, very easy to remember. It's the day after 9/11.
So is it the 10th?
Oh, good Lord. Just go back over what I said in your head and then go back over what you said and realize why that is so incredibly wrong.
I almost peed myself.
I don't know what you're saying. You're talking in dolphin pitch.
Oh God, I can't breathe. I almost peed myself. I realized it's the 12th. And then I go to... I can't, I'm sweating so badly. Which kind of speaks to the whole I can't remember any kind of date or month thing, that I didn't realize that 9/11 wasn't September.
Was the other way around. It wasn't the 9th of November.
Because in Sweden we write it the other way around.
Yeah, like the rest of the world. Yeah.
That was hilarious, but also painful.
Also, I know what day of the week I was born on. Just fun fact for you, because the day after was Friday the 13th.
Oh, yeah.
You say, oh, yeah, like you knew that the 12th of September in 1991 was a Thursday.
No, I just meant that it kind of is a bit of a spoiler to your whole life, isn't it?
No, it isn't.
Although you were quite a happy child, weren't you?
Fuck knows. I've repressed it all.
So they didn't know that you would come into the world and just hate it.
Didn't know I would come into the world as demon spawn.
Oh God, I almost died.
Unlike Alexander Litvinenko, who did. You're listening to Midweek Murders. Prepare for a bumpy ride.
It's gonna be a bumpy ride.
Don't pretend like you know Harry Potter films.
I did know that one.
Obviously.
Obviously.
That needs work.
I did it perfectly, thank you very much. It sounded exactly like you did it. Obviously. Oh, I'm dying.
Oh, geez.
I'm dying already. I'm afraid that we're gonna have to include the 9/11 moment because I died inside.
Because that's the only bants we've got.
But people are gonna be so annoyed.
I mean, how many American bots do we have listening? Like 5?
More Canadian than American, which is funny.
Yeah, so they're not going to care.
Yeah, true.
They're just going to apologize under their breath and carry on listening.
Sorry about it. I was still in the...
Sorry, eh?
I was still in the shrunken head kind of dialect.
Yeah, with a little bit of Swedish in there. Sorry about it.
Sorry about it. Oh God, I genuinely almost peed myself when I realized I had gotten
Because
the
he
month
couldn't
wrong.
work out simple math.
You know,
You don't know me!
you don't even know when my birthday is.
You don't even know where I was born.
Upplands
Upplands
Väsby.
Väsby.
I had to sit and everything to not pee myself because I realized I got the wrong month.
I had to practice my pelvic floor exercises. I haven't done that since I was pregnant.
With the turtle.
That came out as a live birth.
I thought you were going to say as a live bird.
Turtles aren't birds.
Well, you say that, but...
Just because their young are born in eggs doesn't mean they're a burb.
Burb! You're listening to Midweek Murders, which means that it's time to talk about crime. I'm your host, Sandra, and with me is my pal.
You did it wrong.
Tell me how I'm supposed
Just
to...
say, I am your host, Sandra, and then stop, and then I can say, and I'm your host, Joe. Don't leave me with just a one-word response, because I can't give my best with a one-word reply. This is simple economics. Fucking every week. Jesus Christ. And you've got a theatre background. Do you ever write a script and you just have someone walk on stage and then just say, hello, and walk off again? No, because there's no drama with that.
When I leave you with the I'm your host, Sandra, you just don't say anything.
You don't stop. You're like, it's time to talk about crime. I'm your host, Sandra, and here's my friend, Joe.
That's the way. Joe likes it.
No, Joe doesn't lice it. From the top, final take, Midweek Murders, take 2. And action.
You're listening to Midweek Murders, which means that it's time to talk about crime. I'm your host, Sandra.
And I'm your co-host, Joe. See, wasn't that fucking hard, was it?
You're the one who always makes it an issue.
Guess you fuck it up every week.
This week, we're going to talk about the man who solved his own murder. And no, it wasn't Joe.
Because I'm still alive.
And kicking. Is he though? So I got my information from an article in The Guardian written by Luke Harding, Wikipedia, and a BBC timeline of Alexander Litvinenko's death case.
I also got my information from the WikiWikiWa and Litvinenko's inquiry, which was chaired by Sir Robert Owen.
Who's that?
Your mama.
Is that like a judge or a prosecutor or something?
He's probably some kind of legal dude.
Legal dude. That's what we're gonna call him.
That's his technical job description.
Okay, so the last movement before Alexander Litvinenko ended up in the hospital was that he went to a lunch meeting with an Italian dude that was very strange, very strange. He had a past of lying on his CV, and not like the normal lying that everyone does. A lot of lying. He went to Itsu, a known sushi. It sounded like I called my mom by her nickname, Susie.
Susie, do it just like that, Susie. Oh, yeah, like that, Susie. Sorry, I got distracted.
Stop being weird about my mom, dude.
I can't help it. She likes it when I get fricky.
Ew. So they went to a known sushi restaurant called Itsu, a chain restaurant here in London. And then he went to a meeting with one of his friends and a dude that he had only met once at the Millennium Hotel in London. And it was funny because the Guardian article was like, yeah, it was at the Governor Street. I went to London once with my pals, and we ended up in a taxi going back to our hostel where we were staying at. This was before I lived here. And I told the taxi driver that the hostel was on Grosvenor Street, and he didn't get it at all. He was like, the what? I was like, the Grosvenor Street. It's right by the Thames. He was like, what the fuck are you talking about? What do you mean? I was like, well, if you just take us to the Thames, I'm sure we can work it out. It's close to this tube station. He was like, yes, okay. When we got closer, he was like, oh, you're trying to say Grosvenor. I was like, is that how it's pronounced? And I think he pissed himself. He was laughing so hard. End of anecdote. Were you peeing again? No, just didn't find that funny.
I've heard the story before.
I know, but the listener hasn't.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were expecting a reaction from me.
Yeah, but also, like, you're gonna have
What
to...
about the story?
Wow, what a performance. You really sold that.
I'm stage trained. I know.
Acting.
And scene.
Okay, so that wasn't funny, but he was...
Moving swiftly on.
He went to the Pine Bar in London's Millennium Hotel to meet one of his former friends from the Federal Security fucking shit.
I don't think that's their technical
Service.
term.
Federal Security fucking shit. Service.
You would definitely get arrested by the KGB if you called them that.
I couldn't remember the last letter because I'm thinking like FBI for some reason. I'm you know, brainwashed by the American media, yeah.
What does the FBI stand for?
Federal Bureau of Investigation. Gazinga! You didn't think I knew that? I did.
It would do if bureau was pronounced bureau.
Did I not say that?
No, you said bureau.
God damn it. Okay, so the friend that he was meeting was Andrei Lugovio. Lugovoy.
Lugovio, he's an Italian-Russian guy.
Andrei
Lugoyov.
Lugoyov. I knew it. I practiced all of these names before and I had them down. And then I was like...
and then they turned Italian.
Okay. So he went to the bar, met his friend, and then he also met Dmitry Kovtun, who he had only met once before. And he said that he didn't like that guy because he had an appearance of being an alcoholic or a drug addict. Allegedly.
A little too Russian for this Russian guy's liking.
Mm-hmm. So when they were at the hotel, he sat down with Lugoyov, firstly, who he knew from years before. And Lugoyov told him, like, yeah, we're gonna leave soon, so there's no point in ordering anything, but you can order something if you want. Or you could just have the tea that's left in the teapot here at our table. So he was like, okay. So he poured the tea into his teacup. He said that there was only like half a cup left in the teapot. And Andrei asked for a clean cup from the waiter. So the waiter brought him a clean cup. Andrei, not Alexander, by the way. Alexander said to the investigators that he drank maybe 3 sips or 4 and then decided that he wasn't going to drink anymore because it was green tea. He said that it was without sugar, which why would anyone put sugar in green tea? But fair enough. And he said that it was cold, which is probably the worst part of that tea experience, disregarding the poison, obviously. After that, he went home and then starts to feel sick, spends the night vomiting and with diarrhea, and it doesn't get better. So 3 days after that, he gets admitted to the hospital. And the first hospital that he was in was the Barnet General Hospital in North London, because he lived in Muswell Hill, which is very close to where I live. Don't take note of that, Russian bots.
You're the next target for the Kremlin.
Yeah, probably.
Vladimir, if you're listening, we are one of you. Do not target us. Thank you, please.
Thank you, please. No. I was going to say that I don't think I'm ever going to be able to visit Moscow, but I don't think I would want to either, so that's fine. I think you're also blacklisted.
Apparently, it's a very, very pretty place.
Oh yeah, it's so pretty. It is.
If you're Russian sympathizer.
Well, I've seen it on the Google. Yeah, I've been watching Google. I was like, oh, pretty. And Catherine the Great was also her sense of interior design, let's call it that, was supremely spectacular and pornographic.
Ooh,
Oh,
add it to the bucket list.
would be fun, but we're probably never gonna get in now, so you're just gonna have to live with that.
And you say that as though anybody's listening. Hi, Lee. Love you.
At the hospital, well, he's first in one hospital, gets transferred to the University College Hospital in central London because he's placed in intensive care and under armed police guard because they're starting to suspect a poisoning case. First, they thought it was thallium. Please tell us a bit about that. This is your role, Joe.
I have some information.
Hit me with that.
Hit me. Fantastisch, ich liebe dich. Hit me.
What? Was that a thing in the original song?
Yes. Fucking Google it, bitch. Some of the clinical symptoms that he was exhibiting when he was admitted to hospital were synonymous with radiation poisoning, in that he was losing his hair, he had vomiting, and kidney and renal failure. So they did quite a few extensive blood tests on him. However, they were quite quick to rule out thallium poisoning. They did actually test his blood for it, I think, and found that the levels of thallium in his blood weren't clinically significant to indicate the symptoms that he was showing. I don't actually know how long the thallium poisoning was a hypothesis.
I read that it was what he was treated for, and then they realized that some of the symptoms that he was showing wasn't aligned with thallium poisoning.
Yeah, they treated him for thallium poisoning, and they did, I think it was an X-ray to look at bone density and things like that, and they didn't see conclusive evidence of thallium poisoning other than what they'd administered to treat for it.
So I think, and you can correct me on this.
I would be glad to.
I know you would, little Ravenclaw, you.
That was patronizing.jpg.
They found, and this is the part where I think you will correct me, they found an isotope in his pee that they first ruled out as like circumstantial, and then they asked for a larger pee sample, urine sample, sorry. This is why I'm like a bit apprehensive about saying this, but I think they ruled it out because there's polonium and things around us. I was like, where the fuck is the polonium in things around us? That can't be circumstantial. What? Is there polonium in things around us?
No. Put shortly, no. So what I think they probably found in his urine samples was lead.
Yeah, probably.
Rather than polonium. So when polonium degrades, gives off all of its alpha radiation, it turns into lead.
Oh, okay.
And it's perfectly normal to have small amounts of lead exposure to be found in blood and urine samples.
Because there can't be like radioactive things around us. So it must have been lead.
Well, there are radioactive things around us all the time. We have a base level of radiation exposure constantly. When you rule out things like the gamma radiation from the sun, which is radioactive exposure, there's always a baseline level of radioactivity just from natural rocks and things, I think.
So what you're saying is that we are in the midst of making superheroes, right? That's what you're saying?
No. You will
I'm gonna have a baby.
you will not
Put it out on
turn into the Hulk just from walking around.
No, I know. It would have been funny though.
It wouldn't have been funny because we would have a shit ton of Hulks.
My turtle bird baby is gonna be the first super.
Your turtle bird baby is probably because you've been swimming around in nuclear sewage, which is more likely to kill you than it is to make your offspring a superhero.
Hey, don't yuck my yum.
I don't know what that means, but I'm gonna do it.
All right. Okay.
So I think the initial tests that were from Litvinenko's urine probably would have shown an abnormal amount of lead,
Mm-hmm.
but also lead exposure is far more common than polonium exposure. So any of that radioactivity that has degraded will have turned into a more common element. And that's perhaps why they weren't so concerned to start with
Yeah.
a radioactive isotope poisoning.
I think they did ask for a larger urine sample.
They did blood tests too.
Yeah, just before he died, and then they found out that it was polonium. Is that incorrect?
I don't know what tests they took in the hospital, but I know his post-mortem results were pretty much conclusive that it was polonium.
Yeah. Fun fact. Maybe not fun because you seem to be a tough crowd tonight, but I'm going to tell it anyways. Is that Sweden was the first country to expose the whole Chernobyl disaster because they got pings in their thingamajings.
I'm pretty sure it was Ukraine that was the first country to be exposed to the Chernobyl disaster,
No,
given that it happened in Ukraine.
not exposed. I said exposed. No,
That's the same word.
I just realized. I mean, exposed it to the media.
Oh, so you mean detect?
Yeah, because Russia, well, they knew about it in Russia. They just had it in a hush-hush. And then Sweden was
Obviously,
like,
because Ukraine was part of Russia back then.
yeah, and then Sweden was like, wait a minute, there's shitloads of radioactive thingamajings in the air. This is not normal.
That's definitely not a fun story. The Chernobyl exposure was
Horrific.
very much an international disaster.
And then you're gonna tell me that 9/11 was a date that I should have remembered, just like your birthday.
Apologies for the American bots for my co-host's insensitivity to your national disasters.
It was horrible, obviously. I remember it when it was on the TV.
No, you don't.
I do.
You thought it was in November. You don't remember shit.
No, I remember seeing the news about it, but not as it's ingrained in American.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? That's for you, American bots. Love you guys.
I did also remember that my mom was like, oh shit, they've told us that like people born when my oldest brother was born has been affected by the radiation from the Chernobyl disaster. And I'm like, yeah, that's horrible, obviously. But she was afraid of my brother, like afraid of his exposure to it. I'm like, he seems fine.
Yeah, I know people that need to have annual blood tests to determine their radiation levels to see if they're still alive.
It was definitely a thing that generations of people keep having problems with still to this day. And I can't really understand that because of the fact that the polonium that Alexander was poisoned with was so traceable, and still it doesn't seem like that has been a big deal.
So, in terms of longevity of risk, it very much depends on what kind of radioactive isotope you're dealing with. So, all sorts of different elements have different radioactive half-lives. So, the half-life of polonium is about 130 days, I think, 135, something like that, which basically means that if you have 1 gram of polonium in 130 days, it will have degraded enough to be half a gram of polonium and half a gram of whatever it degrades into. I think in this case it's lead. For other radioactive isotopes, and we can use the example of radium, radium has a half-life of 1,500 years.
Oh, so that's probably what happened in the Chernobyl disaster.
Yeah, and that's why, particularly with these disasters, that they're such high-profile international concern, because they're usually using things that have a longer half-life than polonium. I think that's got quite a short half-life compared to most of the isotopes that are used in nuclear reactors.
Mm-hmm. Because I remember from the witness statement that they took from Alexander before he died. So he said that he sat at that table, had the tea, just a couple of clunks of it, swallows of it, and then Andrei took his 8-year-old child to him and said, "This is your uncle Sasha," which is like a nickname of Alexander, or like a term of endearment of Alexander, I think, in Russia. And he said, "Say hello to him." And then his 8-year-old child shook his hand, and then they went to a football game, which was probably the cover of why they said they were going to the UK.
Yeah, and they used that as an excuse. I think it was Chelsea versus CSKA Moscow.
Yeah, or Arsenal, I don't remember. But
yeah, it might have been Arsenal.
Yeah, but also when they realized that it was a polonium poisoning case, the Met in the UK checked his sleeve from his suit that he was wearing on the day of the meeting, and his sleeve was so radioactive. So Andrei, I don't know how much he knew about the poison. It felt like he was yeah, shake his hand, 8-year-old son, and the 8-year-old son did, but it was poisonous.
It's been hypothesized that both Dmitry and Andrei didn't actually know how contaminated they would be by handling the polonium.
Mm-hmm.
There's quite a lot both in the inquiry and on the Wikipedia page. There was a couple of different assassination attempts.
Yeah.
They tried 3 times, once in mid-October, and they put it in his tea, and Litvinenko didn't drink it. The second was at the end of October. The theory is that there were too many cameras around where they were trying to administer the dose. And both of those occasions, they ended up disposing of their polonium down the toilet.
Mm-hmm.
And it was completely traceable. So they found exactly the hotel room was contaminated with polonium. The flights from Moscow to London and London to Moscow were contaminated. So the theory is that both Dmitry and Andrei didn't actually know the level of risk that they were accepting when they took on the case of attempted murder and eventually successful murder of Litvinenko.
I thought it was quite funny that the Guardian article by Luke Harding said that assassins nowadays isn't really on the same like level of the assassins during the KGB. And I thought that that was quite funny, that it was like, well, they didn't do a very good job, did they? Because it was like, yeah, they could trace all of this because of the radiation. It was so clearly laid out for them.
Yeah.
And when Alexander told the investigators from the UK what had happened, he obviously, being a former secret agent, knew everything about like how to describe what he was doing at what day and how they looked and how they acted and what they did. He remembered everything in clear detail.
And it's actually really interesting from a forensic point of view, in that, as far as I'm aware, from what I could find in my research, there is only one worldwide site that creates polonium-210 for either scientific, economic, whatever kind of use. There is only one place in the world that creates polonium-210.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens to be exactly the same place that the polonium-210 that was used in the murder of Litvinenko was found. And you can trace that back to the impurities that are found in that particular sample. So polonium-210 isn't a naturally occurring substance. You can't just like dig it out of the ground or extract it from the air. It needs to go through a specific scientific process to be able to obtain it from things like bismuth and other things that are naturally obtainable. And that polonium has like a specific fingerprint. So you'll never be able to get pure polonium-210. It will always have some kind of fingerprint with other kind of diluents and contamination effects. And the only place in the world that produces it, which is a specific site in Russia, also had the exact fingerprint of the polonium that was found to be used for Litvinenko's death.
Yeah, I found that interesting because it's like they don't even try anymore. They don't care.
Are you telling me you miss the days of the KGB?
No, what I'm telling you is that...
Because I'm sure there are plenty of Russian bots out there that would argue the days of the KGB were absolute tyranny.
Not the bots that listen to our podcast. They will be like, yeah, that's what we're trying to resurrect. No, I'm just saying that...
Good times, bruh. Good times.
What I'm saying is that they aren't even trying to cover their tracks. As we said before, the polonium was traced with the help of the CCTV of the hotel to the two Russian guys that he was in a meeting with. They traced them with CCTV up to the men's bathroom. They knew exactly which cubicle they were in when they administered the poison to the tea. They knew which table they sat at, how much of the kitchen appliances that was contaminated at the time. They knew about the one guy that he had only met once. Wait a minute, I'm trying to look up the name. Bloop, 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 bloop.
Computing.
Dmitry Kovton. He goes up to his hotel room. He tries to flush the polonium down the drain. It gets stuck in the drain. They trace all of this. Like, they can find all of that because of the radioactiveness of the substance. Like, it's not even hard. And then why they do this, I think, is because they can't do anything. The UK was like, you need to extradite Andrei Lugoyev to the UK to stand trial for the murder. They were not like, no, We won't do that.
But it's against Russian law to extradite Russian citizens. So the Russians said no, and then the UK were like, okay.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. They don't give a shit anymore because nobody can do anything.
Well, that's what happens when you vote Conservative.
They invaded Ukraine, and then they were like, what are you gonna do about it? Everyone was like, oh, this is horrific.
This is fine. We don't need to get the UN involved.
That's what I mean.
The whole purpose of the UN is to protect all of its United Nations. But no, it's fine. Russia, you can do what you like. You're big and scary. You've got a guy that fights bears without a shirt on.
Well, that's what they always do. But also, like, Alexander, poor guy, he did his best to aid the investigation and to lead the investigators in the right track of who he had been talking to a meeting during the day and stuff like that. But the problem is that Alexander was like, yeah, you remember this world when I die, that Putin did this to me because he wanted to quiet down critiques of Putin. Like, he doesn't do that. Like, Putin is like, no, everyone who criticized me is dead. And everyone's like, okay, like, we all know what happened. And yet, nobody does anything about it. And that is a bit concerning.
It's the same as the Salisbury case that we covered previously in the it was an ex-Russian spy who came to the UK and was given UK citizenship and protection, and then some random guys from Russia come over and attempt murder.
And just say that they're gonna look at football or the Salisbury Cathedral, then everyone is like, fine.
Yeah, like, how obvious do you need to make a murder case if you're from Russia before the UK government will be like, okay, this is a state-sponsored murder, we're not okay with this?
How many people could have been poisoned at the hotel? How many people in the NHS could have been poisoned at the hospital?
Actually, it's interesting that you should mention that, because I've got a little bit of science.
Science, you'll say. Oh,
yeah, I hope you're sitting down, because I'm about to blow your world. So, polonium, which, as aforementioned, is a substance that was used to kill Litvinenko, actually doesn't have that higher toxicity when exposed to skin, which is why the son of persons aforementioned,
Logoyev.
That's why both Logoyev and Kovton and all of the people that were involved in the murder weren't affected by the polonium themselves, even though they left massive traces all across the world. Putin, if you're listening, sort your agents out. They're fucking shit. Anyway, the reason Litvinenko suffered such extreme conditions and eventual death compared to the agents that handled it is that the actual dermal exposure of polonium isn't lethal. So polonium-210 can actually only move through the skin about 40 microns, which is only a couple of skin layers deep. So when you get exposed to it through contact on the skin, it's not lethal. The reason Litvinenko was murdered was because he ingested it through the tea, which then becomes internal exposure and becomes much more deadly. Yeah, so it's interesting to know the lethal dose of ingested polonium versus how much they administered So the lethal dose, the LD50, the lethal dose for a median of 50% of the population is less than 1 microgram. From what I can tell, it's 0.09 micrograms. Your typical grain of salt, so one single grain of salt is 60 micrograms. So you picture a typical grain of salt from your salt dispenser, 60 micrograms. The lethal dose of polonium is 0.09 micrograms.
Mm-hmm. So that 3 to 4 swallows of that tea was like 100,000 milligrams.
Yeah, what's even more interesting is when you convert micrograms into the standard unit for radiation, which is becquerel, it's 15 megabecquerels, so 15,000 becquerels. The dose that was administered into his tea was 4.4 gigabecquerels.
Oh, good Lord.
So they absolutely overwhelmed his tea with polonium. And in his post-mortem, they found 49,000 becquerels per gram of tissue in his kidneys.
Oh, good Lord.
So the kidney's main function is to filter your blood for toxins. That's
Mhm.
pretty much what your kidneys do, and you pee it out afterwards. So for the post-mortem to find 49,000 becquerels is basically equivalent to 49 megabecquerels in his kidneys. So that's what he has absorbed and filtered through his kidneys. Now remember that the lethal dose is 15 megabecquerels, and he had 49 megabecquerels just in his kidneys.
Mm-hmm.
So he was absolutely annihilated with polonium.
Mm-hmm. They said that they can treat radioactive or polonium exposure with Prussian blue, which I was like, isn't that a cat?
That's a Russian blue.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so Prussian blue, it's basically a generic radiation poisoning solution. I wouldn't say it was a cure because it doesn't always work. The Prussian blue is actually what they detected in his X-ray when they treated him for thallium poisoning.
Mm-hmm.
So they'd already administered the Prussian blue to prevent the poisoning right back at the beginning when they thought it was thallium.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously the dosages that he received were so high that there was literally nothing they could have done to save him. The post-mortem couldn't even identify a single cause of death. They overall summarized that it was undeniably caused by polonium poisoning.
It was murder.
It was definitely murder.
Mm-hmm.
But the final mode of death could have been any 4 number of factors. So typically with radiation poisoning, you would get bone marrow failure. And in this case, his bone marrow failure led to sepsis, which increased his risk of cardiorespiratory arrest. You also get multiple organ failure, and he also suffered direct radiation on the heart, which caused a fatal heart rate, which would have led to cardiorespiratory arrest. Or it could have been a combination of all 3 of those factors. And the reason why they can't rule any of those out is the way that alpha particles work. In the post-mortem, these were described as a cellular bullet. So it's essentially like firing a bullet on the cellular level, in that it hits a cell and absolutely destroys it and just keeps on going until it runs out of energy.
Yeah. And it's also like, I remember watching Chernobyl and Niklas said that, well, it's a bit over the top how they cinematically like show the radiation poisoning symptoms. But then I Googled what does it actually look like, and it was horrific. Like the actual...
Yeah, it really is. So the Chernobyl TV series, I haven't seen it myself, but from what I've heard, they did a really accurate interpretation of what radiation poisoning looks like. So what we expect from radiation poisoning is, I think, mainly from the media in terms of chemotherapy and radiotherapy, in that we expect someone to have a bit of vomiting, to lose their hair and their eyebrows and things like that, and basically for most of their bodily functions to start struggling. When you're actually exposed to Chernobyl levels of radiation or Litvinenko levels of radiation, if you take Chernobyl, the amount of radiation that was given off at those reactors is enough for people's skin to start sloughing off.
Yeah, that's what happened in the series.
Yeah, people can lose their skin cells and it just starts peeling away from their body. What Litvinenko experienced was mass internal organ failure.
You can kind of see that in the last photo of him before he died, because he's very yellow.
Yeah, so the yellow will come from his liver failure. So his liver was exposed to massive amounts of radiation, which means it can't break down any of the bilirubin, which causes jaundice. It's the same with alcoholics. Once you start exhibiting liver failure, you start becoming more jaundiced, and you start showing that orange yellow hue a la Trump.
I'm pretty sure that is like some kind of fake tan, though.
Oh, that's definitely fake tan. Yeah. Unfortunately, I wish he had liver failure. You can cut that or leave it in. I don't really care.
It's mostly Canadian faults and Russian. I'm not gonna say, like, I'm not gonna go into the whole Reddit thing now, but what I wanted to say is that people still think that he was killed by a Russian oligarch that he was friends with, that he put on the hit for him. And I'm like, please, the evidence is overwhelming.
The evidence is overwhelming that Kovtun and Logoyev committed the crime of polonium-assisted murder. It's still up in the air as to who that was authorized by. There's been no overwhelming evidence that it was authorized by the Kremlin.
Well, the MI6 records that were released like 10 years after his actual death kind of cemented the fact that it was ordered by the Kremlin.
Who's to say that a Russian oligarch who wouldn't have had that power within the Kremlin to also authorize that attack? But I'm just playing devil's advocate here because we've got no definitive evidence to say that Putin authorized this assassination, even though the evidence overwhelmingly points in that direction. In a UK court of law, it's not enough to say that this was authorized by the Kremlin.
But I would also like to say, if any Redditors are listening, that the whole thing in Russia, they pointed the blame at Alexander's friend, who was ostracized and condemned by the Russian government. He lives in England because he had political asylum, or he got like a...
Political asylum's the right word.
Yeah, he was being prosecuted by Putin. And to point the blame on him is to say that, well, we didn't have anything to do with it. It was his friend who also got his visa for him and who also paid his salary. I just don't believe it because it feels like it's...
No, and I think it's also interesting to note that once Litvinenko was assigned asylum in the UK, he was incredibly outspoken about Putin's regime.
Yeah.
To the extent that he was publishing books and journal articles and media reports about all kinds of different atrocities that were happening under the Russian regime. And like the Salisbury case, it seems to be like any kind of former Russian agent that defects then becomes a target for Putin's regime to silence effectively.
And I would also like to point out the fact that he was an employee of the MI6 to give them information about the Russian government. He also coined the phrase the mafia state to describe what Putin does in Russia. He was also very outspoken about his friend getting murdered in Russia because of her outspokenness against Putin. And he was also 2 weeks or 1 week away from testifying in the Spanish court about like Russian mafia and their connections to the Kremlin in Spain, because the Russian mafia was there as well. And like I would just like to get that said, because I can't stand all of the conspiracy theories on Reddit, etc., about like, well, no, it wasn't Putin. Alexander was like in too deep with his oligarch friend. It's Russian propaganda to say that he was killed by his friend. Well, he was kind of killed by his friend.
I wouldn't go so far as to call Lugoyev Litvinenko's friend.
Well, they kind of were.
I would say they were colleagues.
Yeah, they were colleagues, but they say the Russian propaganda machine is saying that he was killed by his Russian friend that was also ostracized.
Which we completely support. Russian bots. We are totally in agreement that he was murdered by his friend, and we are not criticizing Putin. Long live Putin.
We should post that photo of him on a bear. Like shirtless. There you go, Russian bots.
That should be the image for this episode.
We're in compliance.
Don't hate us. No. We love you, China. Free Tibet. Wait, what? Who said that?
Oh, God, yeah. Have you seen those videos about people who are like, yeah, the best way to take care of your plants is to please...
Free Tibet.
Please look up the thing with the Muslim minority people who are getting...
Oh, yeah, the... I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's spelled like Uyghurs. Actually, it's interesting that you mentioned the Muslim community in China. So I presume you saw the drone footage of them all being led into trains with the shaved heads and all of that.
Yeah, probably. Was that on Reddit?
It was on Reddit.
Probably.
The BBC hosted an interview with the ambassador for China live in the studio. They showed him this footage, and he was like, where did you get this footage? This footage could have been from anywhere. And it took him like 5 minutes to come up with a reason, and then he was like, oh no, I've got it. I've got a perfectly rational explanation. It's a prisoner transfer. We do it all the time. Everybody does it. It's completely normal. Just ignore my 5 minutes of internal thinking where I come up for a rational excuse as to why we're literally being the Nazis.
Yeah. I know some of it. Like, I've read some of the articles and the exposés about the situation, and it seems super bad. And now we're gonna be followed by the Chinese bots as well.
Well, the more listeners, the merrier.
Yeah, it's super bad.
You listening, China? I'm a massive supporter of Kim Jong-un and his sister. She's hot.
That's
what?
That's North Korea.
I know it's North Korea. They're both communist dictatorships.
I thought you were gonna say they're both, and then something way worse.
They're both cunts. Well, that's a true story, brah.
True story, brah.
I mean, you can leave that in. I don't even care.
We're gonna be banned from so many countries.
Just put that at the beginning.
Yeah. So that's kind of it.
That's a story.
I feel like maybe I didn't say that Alexander Litvinenko solved his own murder by being like, yeah, I did this, I met those people, I did that, and like described their outfits, everything. Like, he was a very, very astute person.
Well, he was trained by the KGB back when they were good.
Yeah, and he also yes, and he also said, like,
apologies, former USSR states who have been subjected to Russian tyranny.
They're awful. They've always been awful. But also, like,
they were terrible, but long live Russia.
But what I wanted to say is that he was very good in his own investigation. He was like, yeah, this is what happened, blah blah blah.
Yeah, he knew he'd been poisoned.
I feel like Putin can do whatever he wants and people will just not care.
Obviously, or he'll take his shirt off and wrestle you. Nobody wants that. And it helps that his main political opposition is an orangutan in a wig and the biggest pile of Humpty Dumpty shit that the UK has ever elected to be a prime minister. Basically, the only person that is holding Putin in his place right now is Angela Merkel. And to be fair, I mean, she's a very scary German lady, but she ain't gonna last forever.
I wish I was more like Trump. He's obviously a bag of dicks, but just because he's like, everything he doesn't want to deal with, he's like, fake news. And I'm like, everything is fake shit.
It's just false media. We're doing the greatest with COVID. Like, all of these other countries, they're just not even testing, and we're doing the most testing. And that's the reason why our numbers are so high, is because we're just doing the most testing.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so sweaty. I haven't taken my meds yet, so I need to go get ready for bed. Taking my meds.
Oh, fucking hell, it's 11:10.
Yeah.
Jesus Christicles.
Jesus Christicles. Jesus God balls. It's happening.
God damn.
Do you want to go say goodbye to the listeners?
Oh, I thought we'd done that hours ago.
Goodbye, listeners.
Love you.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye.